Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Maynard. I'm a geologist with the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality's Groundwater Characterization Program, and I'm here today to talk to you about Karst in Virginia and provide some really quick introductory uh, to karst issues in Virginia and show a couple examples. This is part of the 2021 Virginia Water Well Association meeting. So without further ado, let's start this very quick tour. So starting out, what is karst? It's a landscape that's typified with sinkholes, large springs, sinking streams, and caves. It is a landscape that's formed due to the dissolution of soluble rocks that exist in parts of Virginia. In Virginia, that's going to be limestone and dolomite. These are calcium carbonate and calcium and magnesium carbonate rocks that dissolve with rainwater that is mixed with carbon dioxide that from the atmosphere and in the soil forms a weak acid, and it enlarges any of this incipient fractures and bedding planes or any weakness in the rock that the water can flow through. Those over time get enlarged and turn into conduits that feed into bigger conduits and cave systems. And what that means is that groundwater can flow very long distances rapidly with very little filtration. And uh, things that happen on the landscape, say dumping in sinkholes, septic systems, fertilizer applications, landfills, etc., can rapidly get into the system and move very far and contaminate great distances. So where are we talking about in Karst in Virginia? This map of Virginia with the 5 physiographic provinces uh, is showing us that when we're talking about karst lands, we're talking predominantly about the Valley and Ridge province. These blue shaded areas are karst rocks, calcium carbonate rocks in Virginia's western region predominantly. There are some dissolvable rocks or in other parts of the state, but the main karst bearing units are in the Valley and Ridge. And the Valley and Ridge is a series of sedimentary rocks, some of them carbonate and some of them non-carbonate rocks that have been very highly deformed, faulted and folded over millennia and into very complex patterns and overprinted with uh, quite a network of fractures and folds that are exploited by this acidic water that enlarges these systems. So it can get complicated relatively quickly. So when we think about karst, it's pretty easy to immediately jump to caves. Virginia is blessed with a pretty good density of caves in the western part. Some of these, like the one on the left in Massanutten Caverns, are show caverns. There's a whole host of very, we call wild caves in the western part of the state that are, you need some experience or go with someone that's experienced to explore them, but they're pretty mind-blowing cavities in the earth that were formed due to this dissolution in this area at some point. Some caves in the lower portions of them are still actively being dissolved away by stream networks that are moving through them. Some portions of the caverns are high and dry and are actually reprecipitating the calcium carbonate minerals from higher up in the system. There's a whole world of exploration to be done in caves. As I said, it is mind blowing. You should go with someone that's experienced because you can get in a lot of trouble quickly if you're just poking around in some of these caves. I recommend checking out the Virginia Speleological Society or the National Speleological Society at caves.org for more information on caves. Um, so other than jumping in a show cave, probably the most obvious example or easily demonstrated feature of parklands in Western Virginia is sinkholes, and you can usually see these when you're driving on the highway. These are sinkholes are internally drained depressions in the landscape where water, if it would accumulate, but there's no outlet for water to continue flowing downhill. But it's not ponding up. These aren't farmers' ponds that are holding water. These are drained natural structures. This map of the western part of the Shenandoah Valley, this would be Rockingham County and Augusta County, city of Stanton and Harrisonburg, Highland County, Bath County, Rockbridge County. The blue ribbony units here are the extent of the calcium carbonate rock units in the area. And over top of that, I have the mapped sinkhole structures that exist in the area. You can see that the area is really peppered with these structures that are draining them. And there's several types of sinkholes that can exist in Virginia, sometimes one on top of each other, but probably the most common type of sinkhole you're going to see is a subsidence sinkhole, where as the underlying conduit system is piping away the overlying soil, the soil starts to, over time, depress down into the structure. This is a common sight you would see throughout Virginia, and you might miss it on first view, but if you look at where water would want to drain through this area, it would be going downhill, but there's no outlet and there's no ponding. There's trees down in here, and occasionally you'll actually see some open throat structures that will open up over time under this sinkhole, or maybe not. You can see there's more sinkholes in the back here. This would be a sinkhole plain. These are very common types of sinkholes in Virginia. This is Pulaski County, for example. Here's another type of sinkhole, an open throat sinkhole in Rockingham County. This is a common type of feature you might see in a farmer's field, where it's on the edge or right in the middle of the field. You'll see an area that hasn't been cut, trees away, because you can't farm these holes here. Oftentimes there's a lot of debris that will be naturally falling in or has been tossed in by people in the area over time. It's not uncommon to find carcasses of dead livestock in there, or trash. There's extensive clean outs that happen with some of these. But in this type, instead of just a nice gentle thing, at the bottom you actually see limestone bedrock, an opening, and in this case is access to a cave called 3D Maze Cave. So these again, this is kind of on the other end of the spectrum of sinkholes, and are very common in Western Virginia. A little less common, but much more feared type of sinkhole are the cover collapse sinkholes. These kind of are, the soil is raveling away below into the limestone bedrock, but the soil isn't gently over time depressing down into it like a subsidence sinkhole. There's actually like a bridging or a void in the soil that is working its way up to the top of the surface, and over time it just hits a point where it's structurally can't hold the weight anymore, and things collapse in. Okay, and these are basically the scariest ones because they happen overnight sometimes, swallow up portions of roads, or in this case up in Clark County, this is the this house actually, I guess in 1992, was built on a very small lot that had a well that was drilled and a septic system on the same lot. And over a short period of time, with the homeowner in the house started to fall into the sinkhole below, and eventually the entire house fell in the sinkhole. There was nothing that could be done. So these types of sinkholes and sinkholes in general can evolve through time, and especially if there's any type of modification of the way that water infiltrates into the area. So when you put like say a parking lot in an area and concentrate water into a sinkhole, you're kind of asking for that to open up. In this case, drilling a well and having a septic system on a quarter-acre lot was what was necessary to get this one to activate. And a not uncommon feature in this portion of the state is a stream capture type sinkhole or stream piracy, where a stream that is flowing across the surface will suddenly drop into its riverbank. Occasionally, you'll actually see it dropping into limestone bedrock, but in this case, the sinkhole is underneath all of this river sediment. All of these rounded sandstone blocks are covering up the limestone bedrock, and for portions of the year, the stream just ends right here. At higher flow, it goes past this point, but that conduit is still accepting the water and sediment. And over time, sinkholes will open up in different parts of this particular stream bed, dry river, and this set of sinkholes has been traced about 2 miles to the south into a different drainage at a pretty major spring. And that spring will, once these sinkholes become active, sediment will be moving through, and you'll actually get a high degree of muddy water and sediment that blows out of the spring for a period of time naturally. So that brings me to some of my last stuff here. This is like one of the last natural features that we're going to talk about that are typical features of a karst terrain, and that's springs. Springs are where groundwater becomes surface water. So all of that rainwater that gets into sinkholes or into the fractures, streams that are getting pirated, tend to come up somewhere further down in the karst system. And springs are discrete locations where that water emerges, and they can be pretty large in the karst terrain. That's one of the defining features. Since they are large supplies, but not uncommon to have several hundred gallons to 1,000 gallons per minute coming out of spring. They've historically been very important for domestic, agricultural, and municipal water supplies. Now, some of these springs have very consistent water quality and flow characteristics. They're not very affected by seasonal changes in drought times or a big storm that comes through, but many of them are very influenced by that. Even if they have a base level of flow that they kind of go to, they can get flashy and blow a lot of sediment and mud out for a period of time, and have really high flows for a short period of time, or they dry up almost completely during drought times. So the whole range of the way that these springs behave in Western Virginia. A lot of these, especially larger springs, can be receiving water from several miles away in the karst system, and because of that, they're very susceptible to the land uses that are done in that area. So contaminants can move very quickly in this region, and because of that, all of this karst water, springs, and anything you obtain from wells should really be treated before drinking, because of that easily contaminatable aspect. Sometimes in these areas, you'll find a little hand dipper where people used to come up and just drink straight out of it, but with increased population density, that's just really asking for trouble these days. This is an example of Gardner Spring. This actually is a municipal spring that empties into Middle River in Augusta County. This is this particular spring supplies about half of the city of Stanton's water supply. So it's a very significant water supply for municipal purposes. This is a common site where you'd see a spring house that protects the actual spring opening from vegetation, and actually was used for a period as a way to refrigerate dairy products and other goods before refrigeration was electrified. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is a human-made influence will be when we drill wells in karst. Oftentimes, there isn't a spring or a stream right near whatever endeavor you're trying to do in a certain area. So it's pretty common to have to drill a water well to get what the water you need where you need it. And as you can imagine, just as there's very large springs and there's caves and a lot of water moving through the area, it's very possible to get some very large well yields. So a well that can produce several hundred to a couple thousand gallons per minute isn't unheard of out in this region. But it's very highly variable. If you hit the right conduit, then you might be able to get a very high yield. 20 feet away, if you drilled a well, you might not get anything. Another aspect is that drilling in this region can be pretty difficult. The drillers have a hard time dealing with mud seams and borehole instability in this area. The sediment can fall in on the drill rod and cause drilling to be very difficult. And oftentimes that means that there's a lot more steel casing that needs to be set in the ground to hold those zones open. Some of the common issues in wells that are drilled in karst that you end up having is what we call hard water or mineralized water, that water that has dissolved some of those calcium carbonate minerals is carrying those minerals with it, and that can make certain processes difficult, like soap use for laundering. You can have some precipitation of minerals on porcelain or water heaters, etc. And it can be hard for certain industrial processes if they need pretty unmineralized water. Turbid water is a common issue after big rainstorms or snow melt off. Some wells will become turbid as a blast of muddy water kind of moves through the conduit system. You're going to get that too. Often, other times, if you're pumping really hard, you can induce turbidity in the water. Okay, sediment infilling kind of relates to that. You can that sediment that's moving through can actually end up plugging the parts of the well that are actually producing the water for the well and need to be cleaned out or addressed. Some of the unstable zones that you encounter in these conduits can collapse into the borehole if they're not properly cased off. And one other thing that occurs is, some of these wells in certain areas have a very large range in seasonal water levels. So, during a couple years of less than average rain and snow, you can actually get some, the water level can drop below the pump and dry up the well for that person, and they have to call the well driller to come out and lower the pump, and hopefully there's enough range for them to do that. And again, just like in springs, contamination can move very quickly. It's unfiltered, and it's going to, unless you are having some treatment, you're going to be getting that right into your water supply. So with that, I'm going to move to just trying to show you a video of what common, hopefully you're able to see this video. This is what a common karst well would look like. This is in Craig County. over here in the left-hand bottom part of the screen, this is the depth encoder. So this is the depth below land surface, 145 feet. And you can see we're below the steel casing, the surface casing, and we're in an open borehole. This is just a limestone bedrock on the sides. And you can see that there's not really any water that's going to be coming from this zone. If the well was terminated right around here, you would have a pretty low productivity well, probably a dry well. But as they proceeded a little deeper, then they hit this very high productive karst conduit. And this is what you would probably see in most karst wells in the region. We open up into a water-filled cave, and you can see there's this is a set of fractures that have been enlarged through time. There's kind of rounded as the dissolution process has occurred, and there's a brown drapery of mud over every surface. So if you were pumping really hard on this well, let's say if this well was technically capable of producing 50 gallons a minute, you may practically only be able to get 20 gallons a minute, because if you pump harder than that, you increase the velocity of water in this zone, it can pick this sediment up, okay, and pull it up into the pump and into your piping, and you get muddy water. Also, that water, this conduit can just get naturally muddy after certain rain events. With enough prolonged pumping, you can actually get you can even burn out your well pump. And here's an example of what you can sometimes find in these bottom of the well. If you're looking closely, you might start to make out some whiskers and some tails here. This is actually a pile of dead rodents that have managed to get their way into this well. The sanitary seal that holds these guys out was compromised by a tractor that was bush hogging in the field. It knocked a small little nick in the top of the well cap, and over time these guys have forced their way into that looking for food and fallen down into the well, not able to get out, and they rot and slowly, gently fall down to the bottom. So if there was a well pump in this well, you're pulling water past these rotting rodents, okay? You have the potential to be pulling up some of this muddy silt and anything else that's connected to this karst conduit. A farmer's field, there might be a sinkhole with a dead cow that's in it. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed our very short trip in Virginia's karst terrain, and take care. Have a good one.